I was not told that it was canceled. I was told through an assistant who read it in the trades.
Turns out Shorty is a demon. Somebody stop this woman before it's too late.
Why was it necessary for you to come out, tell the public? Why was it necessary for the character to do so?
Because it's okay. Because it is okay.
At 67, Ellen DeGeneres isn't living the fairy tale ending fans imagined.
I say that and men think I'm being chauvinistic.
No, it's not at all, because they'll accept a certain amount, they'll accept a little more aggression.
Once America's queen of kindness, she's now surrounded by silence, regret, and whispers of betrayal.
Ellen is like an old, but it's a rough one now. It's a rough one now because she was running Abu Ghraib in the back of her show.
Her empire has faded, her circle has vanished, and insiders say the truth behind Ellen's downfall is far more tragic than anyone dares to admit. So let's get into the details. Ellen DeGeneres, the woman America once called its sweetheart, built an empire out of kindness, laughter, and a little bit of mischief. She turned daytime television into a sanctuary, a place where dancing, hope, and humor ruled, the face that launched a million smiles, the voice of Dory, everyone's favorite forgetful fish, who made the world remember her name. She wasn't just a comedian, she was a movement, a pioneer who smashed barriers and paid the price for it.
When the turbulence happens, all you see ahead of you the entire time is...
But here's the part the world didn't see. The higher Ellen climbed, the heavier the crown became. Fame turned from fuel to fire, and behind that sparkling smile, something darker simmered. Something that not even her charm could silence. Because the woman who made millions laugh was carrying a past that could make anyone cry. Behind the laughter was a life built on pain, the kind that doesn't heal, only hides. Born January 26, 1958, in Metairie, Louisiana, Ellen was raised in what looked like a simple middle-class home. Her father, Elliot, sold insurance. Her mother, Betty, kept the family together. On the surface, it was ordinary, but ordinary doesn't always mean safe.
Turns out Shorty is a demon. Somebody stop this woman before it's too late.
When Ellen was just 15, the perfect family picture shattered. Her parents' divorce split the home in two. Her brother, Vance, stayed with their father, while Ellen followed her mother into a new marriage and a new home in Atlanta, Texas. But that house wasn't a refuge. It was a trap, a place where silence screamed louder than words. Because inside those walls, Ellen endured a betrayal that would scar her for life. A stepfather who crossed the most sacred boundaries. A monster hiding in plain sight. And the worst part? Her mother didn't believe her. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear that her already crumbling world would completely collapse.
At an early age to accept people and love everyone, and you've always been a wonderful example of what a strong woman can do.
Betty was battling breast cancer, weak and broken, unable to imagine the man she trusted could be capable of such horror, so she didn't see the truth, and Ellen was left alone with it. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was punishment. For decades, Ellen would hide that wound behind laughter, behind charm, behind the glittering success that made her untouchable. But every joke, every dance, every smile on that stage carried an echo of what she'd survived. And as we peel back the layers of the woman America thought she knew, we find not just fame, but pain, betrayal, and a truth too raw for daytime TV.
I mean, it's a really horrible, horrible story, and the only reason I'm actually going to go into detail about it is because I want other girls to not,
A tragedy of two souls, a mother and daughter bound not by comfort, but by pain. Two women crushed beneath the weight of one man's cruelty. Ellen and her mother Betty lived parallel heartbreaks, one fighting for her life, the other for her sanity. Years later, Ellen would admit that the pain didn't just fade away, it moved in. It became part of her. The laughter the world adored was born from tears the world never saw. The irony was brutal. The woman who made millions laugh learned her first lessons in survival through silence, fear, and betrayal. Her teenage years weren't filled with friends and freedom. They were spent inside a cage built from fake family smiles, the kind that looked perfect in photos, but hid chaos behind every frame. Ellen learned early that pictures lie, and sometimes so do people. But from that wreckage, something powerful began to grow. Not joy, defiance. Her weapon wasn't rage or revenge, it was humor, sharp, biting, self-aware. She didn't tell jokes to entertain. She told them to survive. Every punchline was a scar disguised as laughter. Every laugh she earned was one less tear she'd shed.
That's what I want to talk about. Life is short and it's fragile, and we don't know how many birthdays we have, so just We don't have to have a birthday to celebrate, just celebrate life.
When the world finally saw her, the quick wit, the easy charm, the smile that could light up a room, few realized they were watching someone who had already stared down the darkest corners of human cruelty. Comedy wasn't her career. It was her armor. It was rebellion. It was survival. The scars of her past didn't vanish when the spotlight found her. They just learned how to hide in plain sight. Ellen DeGeneres, the woman who taught America to dance, to laugh, to be kind, was once a child silenced by disbelief and betrayal. But she refused to stay quiet. She turned her pain into punchlines and her trauma into triumph. And that's exactly where her rise truly began.
It's really hard. Yeah. Because, and when I come out here, it's not like I have to fake it. And so for that 1 hour, and if we do 2 shows, 2 hours.
From the ashes of betrayal, Ellen DeGeneres built something unthinkable, a voice the world would one day celebrate. The same voice that was almost silenced forever by the shadows of her youth. Out of tragedy, a stage was waiting, a destiny that demanded she turn pain into performance, survival into showmanship. The girl who once hid in silence grew into a woman with nothing left but grit and willpower. No safety net, no silver spoon, just a broken heart and a dangerous belief that she was meant for more. In 1976, she dropped out of the University of New Orleans after just 1 semester. No degree, no plan, no promise, just that storm brewing inside her. She drifted back to New Orleans, a city pulsing with rhythm and laughter, where joy was currency and struggle was the price of entry. For Ellen, it wasn't glamour, it was war.
What's not easy is for me to turn it on when I feel sad inside. That's the depression. That's where I'm in myself. I'm not good when I'm going through
Rent was always late. The cupboards were bare. The bills stacked like walls closing in. She took any job that would keep her alive. Secretary by day, waitress by night, bartender by dawn. Folding clothes at JCPenney until her back screamed. Typing legal briefs until her fingers cramped. Painting murals with hands raw from scrubbing. Every job left its mark, not on her resume, but on her soul. Each paycheck barely bought survival, but each shift carved her tougher. Every hour spent wiping tables or counting tips became a silent contract with herself. I will not stay here forever. She learned to stretch $1 into a week, to treat hunger like an unwanted roommate, to laugh with customers while her own stomach was empty. And still, through all that noise and exhaustion, something inside her wouldn't die. In her bag, she carried a battered notebook, its pages smudged with coffee, sweat, and desperation. Inside were her secrets, sharp one-liners, odd observations, half-finished stories, fragments of pain disguised as jokes, seeds of something extraordinary.
But like I said, I also have other emotions.
That notebook was her weapon, her therapy, her rebellion. It didn't look like much, but those scribbles would one day set the stage for the rise of a woman who turned her suffering into a spotlight. At night, in that dim, rented room where the wallpaper peeled like old wounds and the single bulb buzzed overhead, Ellen DeGeneres performed to ghosts. Her shadow danced across cracked walls, the only audience that never left. Sometimes, she practiced in front of a chipped mirror. Sometimes, her pet was the only witness. It was in those lonely hours that she turned heartbreak into humor, hunger into punchlines, and silence into rhythm.
If you haven't told someone you love them, do it now. Do it. Tell people you love them. Call your friends, text your friends, hug them, kiss them.
Her dinners were half sandwiches saved from her shifts. Her applause existed only in her imagination. The quiet between jokes felt heavier than exhaustion, but she never stopped. Each night, she sharpened her wit like a blade, slicing through despair with timing so precise it could make pain sound funny. Every scribbled line, every awkward rehearsal wasn't just comedy. It was therapy, rebellion, survival. She wasn't just chasing laughter. She was fighting for it. By the early 1980s, she began stepping into the smoke-filled comedy clubs of New Orleans, the kind of places where laughter had to be earned. The crowds were impatient, the lights harsh, and the pay barely enough to cover rent. She wasn't polished, not yet fearless, but her voice was different, quick, smart, disarmingly honest. She didn't tell jokes to hide her pain. She dissected it, turned it inside out, and made it art.
Be nice to the people at the DMV. They're people. Be nice to them. And I love each and every one of you. I know that you wait for tickets and you get here and you pick out your TV outfit.
She joked about her awkwardness, her failures, her loneliness, and somehow made audiences feel seen through her own scars. Some nights the clubs were half empty. Some nights not a single laugh echoed back. She'd walk home broke, clutching loose coins that mocked her dreams. But she refused to quit because every joke was rebellion. Every laugh was proof she was still alive. And that fire, that relentless refusal to break, began to draw attention. Word spread through New Orleans' underground comedy scene about a young woman with lightning wit and a disarming honesty. The name Ellen DeGeneres became a whisper in smoky backrooms and among talent scouts, the funniest person nobody knew. And then, that whisper reached Hollywood. It reached the producers of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, the ultimate proving ground for comedians. Few women had ever made it there. Even fewer had been invited to sit on the couch beside Carson himself. But Ellen was about to change that, and she'd do it with the same quiet defiance that had carried her out of silence and into the spotlight.
She'll be at the San Francisco Punchline the 3rd through the 6th of December, and at the Dallas Improv December the 9th through the 6th to 14th. Would you welcome Ellen DeGeneres? Ellen?
And then, in 1986, destiny called. For any young comedian, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson wasn't just a gig. It was the moment. The one stage where careers were made and broken, where legends were born under those blinding studio lights. Johnny Carson wasn't just a host. He was a kingmaker. And that night, Ellen DeGeneres was stepping straight into his court.
I've been keeping in shape lately, you know. You have to. I'm getting older. I'm 27. People say, you don't look 27, you look like you're about 23. I'm lucky because that runs in my family.
Backstage, her hands trembled. Her heart thundered against her ribs. But beneath the nerves was something far stronger. The survivor who'd learned to fight with laughter. The waitress who'd scraped through hunger. The broken girl who'd once whispered jokes into the dark. When she finally stepped into the spotlight, her calm seemed effortless. Her delivery, clean, sharp, and slyly profound. And then it happened, the moment every comedian dreamed of. Johnny Carson laughed. Not just politely, genuinely. And when he gestured for her to join him on the couch, that sacred seat reserved for the chosen few, the entire comedy world took notice. In that instant, Carson wasn't just validating her set. He was crowning her. A woman who had clawed her way from silence to superstardom, from pain to punchlines, was now being told by America's comedy godfather himself, you belong here.
This is a good night for a young comedian to appear because you're all in a great mood. This is her first appearance on network television, although she can be seen this month on HBO's Young Comedian Special. And she's working at the Improvisation in San Diego.
That night wasn't just a debut. It was redemption performed live. Every clap of the audience echoed a piece of her journey. The lonely girl in the cracked mirror, the exhausted waitress, the broke dreamer rehearsing between shifts. She wasn't chasing laughter anymore. She had earned it. From that moment on, Ellen DeGeneres was unstoppable. Her wit, disarming, intelligent, and refreshingly kind, made her a late-night favorite and a daytime darling before she even had her own show. By the mid-1990s, she'd built her empire brick by brick, from cramped comedy clubs to guest spots on every major stage in America. Then came the ultimate reward, her own sitcom. Simply titled Ellen, it wasn't just another show. It was a crowning moment. The story of a woman who had turned her pain into performance and her performance into power. Audiences adored her warmth, her awkward charm, her effortless timing. It seemed like destiny had finally decided to make it right.
I mean, what is wrong? Why do I have to be so ashamed? I mean, why?
But just when the world thought Ellen had reached the top, fate unveiled its next test, one that would redefine her legacy forever. In 1997 came the puppy episode. On screen, Ellen's character spoke the words that mirrored her real-life truth. She was gay. And off-screen, Ellen herself chose to step into that same light. The moment was seismic, part confession, part revolution. Hollywood wasn't ready. America wasn't ready. But Ellen, she had spent a lifetime preparing for this battle.
When I was a little girl, we came to this lot, to the Warner Brothers lot, and took the tour and went around. And now I work on the Warner Brothers lot and I have my own stage with my name on it.
It was groundbreaking. It was courageous. It was the unfiltered honesty of a woman who'd grown tired of pretending. In that moment, Ellen DeGeneres didn't just come out, she came through years of silence, shame, and fear to claim her truth in front of the world. But the price of authenticity, as always, was steep. Behind the thunderous applause was a quiet terror. Ellen knew exactly what was at stake. To speak her truth was to gamble everything she had clawed her way toward, her career, her reputation, her future. For one shining moment, it felt like victory. But what came next was nothing short of cultural execution.
Why was it necessary for you to come out, tell the public? Why was it necessary for the character to do so?
because it's okay.
Advertisers vanished overnight. Sponsors pulled out. The same media that had once crowned her Hollywood's golden girl turned vicious. Headlines mocked her. Conservative voices sharpened their knives. Ratings nosedived. And by 1998, Ellen, the sitcom that had broken barriers, was gone, canceled. Not because it failed to make people laugh, but because the world failed to accept who she was. In the blink of an eye, Ellen DeGeneres went from America's sweetheart to its scapegoat. Hollywood turned its back. Studios stopped calling. For years, she lived in the shadow of her own truth, punished for her courage in a culture that demanded conformity. The silence that haunted her as a child returned, but this time, it echoed across an entire industry. Yet from that silence came something even stronger, because Ellen wasn't built to stay broken. She had been here before, in smaller rooms, darker nights, with less hope, and she had survived. Piece by piece, she rebuilt her career. She took small gigs, voiceover work, appearances wherever she could. She clawed her way back with the same stubbornness that had carried her through everything else. And then came 2003, the rebirth, the Ellen DeGeneres Show. What began as a risky network experiment became a revolution. She didn't just host, she healed. Daytime television became her new stage, her redemption arc, a space where laughter, kindness, and dancing weren't just gimmicks. They were rebellion. Every giveaway, every joke, every spontaneous dance was her way of reclaiming joy, of saying, I'm still here.
If people at home don't understand that that is our building, that is my billboard, that is what you see when you walk in here. And I got a rainbow before he died.
For nearly 2 decades, Ellen ruled daytime. She became a brand, an empire, a phenomenon. With 60-plus daytime Emmys, global syndication, and millions watching daily, she turned her name into a synonym for laughter and light. Her influence stretched far beyond the studio, from voicing Dory in Pixar's Finding Nemo and later Finding Dory, to hosting the Oscars, the Grammys, the Emmys. Ellen was everywhere.
Today is Monday. And yesterday was Sunday. It happened to be my birthday, and the Grammy Awards, I was nominated. I didn't win, not the point.
And in 2016, the journey came full circle. Standing at the White House, tears in her eyes, Ellen received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama, the nation's highest civilian honor. The world that once silenced her was now applauding her. But the irony was staggering, because even as she was being celebrated as the Queen of Kindness, another storm, darker, colder, and far more personal, was already gathering behind the curtain. In 1997, honesty had nearly destroyed her. But by 2016, that same honesty made her a national treasure. The truth that once cost Ellen DeGeneres everything had somehow become the cornerstone of her empire, a symbol of resilience, authenticity, and second chances. She was living proof that America loved nothing more than a good comeback story, until it didn't.
Ellen DeGeneres was daytime TV's queen of nice. She danced, she talked to cute kids, and surprise, she's...
Because when Ellen fell again, it wasn't the networks or the tabloids that brought her down. It was the internet. The same nation that once cheered her courage now questioned her kindness. The same smile that once lit up daytime television suddenly looked like a mask. And it all started with a tweet. On March 20th, 2020, as the world sat locked inside their homes craving comfort and connection, comedian Kevin T. Porter posted a tweet that looked like a harmless joke, but it hit like a bomb. He wrote, "Right now, we all need a little kindness. You know, like Ellen DeGeneres always talks about, she's also notoriously one of the meanest people alive." He promised to donate to charity for every story shared. Within hours, Twitter turned into a confessional booth. Baristas, waitresses, ex-employees, audience members, people who had brushed against Ellen's world, came forward with tales that didn't match the brand of kindness she had built her empire on. Some said staff were forbidden from making eye contact with her. Others described cold dismissals, humiliation, even punishment for small mistakes.
Hey, Ellen DeGeneres, I hope you never find employment again.
Whether those stories were true or exaggerated didn't matter. The damage was done. The internet, bored in quarantine and hungry for villains, crowned a new one. Clips resurfaced like evidence in a trial. The infamous Mariah Carey pregnancy ambush, Dakota Johnson's birthday call-out, and Taylor Swift's awkward interview, once brushed off as Ellen being Ellen, now look sinister in hindsight. Fans who had once laughed started to flinch. Replace Ellen trended worldwide. The internet that had once made her a global icon now turned into her executioner.
The Ellen DeGeneres Show is facing new allegations this morning.
Then came the real blow. On July 16, 2020, BuzzFeed News dropped an explosive investigation. 10 former employees accused the Ellen DeGeneres show of being a toxic workplace, ruled by fear, favoritism, and silence. 3 senior producers were later accused of sexual misconduct. The fallout was immediate. Warner Media launched an internal investigation. The producers were fired, but Ellen's once untouchable brand of kindness was cracked wide open. When the show returned in September 2020, Ellen stood beneath the studio lights, the same stage that had once felt like home, and faced the world. "I take responsibility for what happens at my show. This is the Ellen DeGeneres show. I am Ellen DeGeneres," she apologized. She admitted the culture behind the scenes didn't match her message, but to many, her nervous laughter and self-aware jokes made it feel like damage control, not redemption. The apology was heard, but the trust was gone.
The accusations were kind of wild against Ellen. Supposedly, you weren't allowed to look her in the eye, she treated staff like peasants, and one former writer of her show said that she had a sensitive nose.
The damage was already carved too deep to undo. Ratings plummeted. More than 1 million viewers vanished overnight. Sponsors quietly backed away, and the empire that had once thrived on laughter and light began to crumble under the weight of disbelief. The public trust that Ellen had spent 2 decades building was evaporating, faster than her team could spin a new narrative. Even as celebrity allies like Katy Perry and Kevin Hart defended her, cracks widened when others, like Brad Garrett and Leah Thompson, stepped forward to confirm the rumors were true. Suddenly, the smiling safe haven of daytime TV looked less like a kingdom of kindness and more like a carefully curated illusion.
Since I preach kindness every day, this is a big one for me.
By May 2021, the inevitable happened. Ellen announced that season 19 would be her last. On camera, she claimed she was leaving because the show was no longer a challenge. But to anyone paying attention, the timing said everything her PR team wouldn't. It wasn't retirement, it was retreat. After 19 years of commanding America's afternoons, the queen of daytime television was stepping down, not by choice, but by circumstance. When the final episode aired in May 2022, the full circle symbolism was impossible to ignore. Jennifer Aniston, her first ever guest, returned for the farewell. It should have been a celebration, a glittering send-off for one of TV's most beloved hosts. Instead, it felt uneasy, heavy. The applause was there, the tears were real, but beneath it all was a silence no one dared to name.
So then what came next was the internet pile-on, which didn't help Ellen's case. People on social media started posting interview clips from her show over the years that were kind of cringy.
The laughter that once echoed across that stage now carried the faint sound of goodbye. Ellen smiled, but her eyes told a different story, one of exhaustion, disillusionment, and loss. That stage, her sanctuary for nearly 2 decades, had become her undoing. She wasn't leaving because she wanted to. She was leaving because she could no longer outrun her shadow. And so an era ended, not in glory, but in quiet contradiction. The Ellen DeGeneres show had once redefined daytime television, spreading joy to millions and turning kindness into cultural currency. Yet its downfall became a brutal reminder of how fragile legacies really are, how years of goodwill can vanish in a single wave of doubt, how fast applause can turn into accusation. For Ellen, it wasn't just the end of a show, it was the end of an illusion, the heartbreaking moment when America's beacon of kindness became its cautionary tale.
I have mentioned before that we taped the show in advance, and we taped yesterday's show last week.
It was heartbreaking. It was humbling. But above all, it was human. Ellen's fall didn't erase the good she had done. It didn't undo the laughter she'd sparked, the hope she'd given, or the barriers she'd broken. But it didn't erase the pain either, the stories of those who said they'd been hurt under her watch. What it did reveal was a truth the world often forgets. No one, not even those who seem larger than life, can carry perfection forever. And perhaps that was the cruelest irony of all. After surviving childhood trauma, career exile, and a cultural firestorm, Ellen was finally brought down by the very words that had once made her invincible. Be kind to one another. The phrase that turned her into a household name became both her greatest legacy and her heaviest burden.
There was an internal investigation. They interviewed more than 100 people connected with the show, and now Ellen's leadership team is getting overhauled.
But behind the talk show, lights and punchlines, behind the fame and fallout, there was always another thread in Ellen's story, one far more personal, raw, and costly. The threat of love. For Ellen, love was never soft. It was a battlefield where truth came with a price tag, and the currency was pain. In 1997, just as she made television history by coming out in the Puppy episode, Ellen walked the red carpet for the movie Volcano, holding the hand of actress Anne Heche. Two women, smiling, unapologetic, a simple act that detonated like a cultural bomb. It wasn't just romance, it was rebellion.
Susan, I'm gay.
In that moment, they weren't just a couple. They were a challenge to everything Hollywood and middle America thought it understood about love. Courage came with consequences. Almost overnight, Hollywood turned its back. Contracts vanished. Sponsors fled. Ellen's sitcom was canceled. The phone that once rang with offers now rang with silence. For Anne, the backlash was just as brutal. Her family rejected her. Tabloids stalked her. And the same industry that had once celebrated her now treated her like a cautionary tale. Their relationship burned bright but brief, ending in 2000, smothered by the pressure of a world still too afraid to see love without labels. Neither woman walked away unscarred. Ellen withdrew, rebuilding behind walls of silence and control. Anne spiraled into turbulence. Her private pain splashed across headlines.
And I appreciate it very much, and I know that I am lucky to have a wife who loves me so much, even though I don't have a Grammy.
And then, in 2022, tragedy struck. A fiery car crash ended Anne Heche's life at just 53. A final heartbreak for a woman who had already endured too many. For most, it was another celebrity headline, but for those who remembered her love with Ellen, it felt like a ghost from a different era. A reminder of how dangerous authenticity once was, and how high the cost of honesty could be. What began as a love that dared to shine ended in a silence no one could ever fill. Looking back, Ellen and Anne's story was not one of failure. It was one of sacrifice. Theirs was a love too bold for its time, and because of that, it suffered the cruelty of its time. They paid the price in reputation, in career, and in peace of mind. Also, others could one day love without fear. That's the cruelest truth of all. What cost them nearly everything became the foundation of the freedoms others now take for granted. Their story wasn't just about two women in love. It was about a society unready for honesty, and the scars such honesty left behind.
I want to ask why one would have such a domain after 20 years of trying to shut somebody up, so much so that her name could not be whispered.
In 2001, she found it, or at least the promise of it, in Alexandra Hedison, a photographer and actress with a quiet soul and an artist's eye. Alexandra saw the world in still frames, in light and shadow, in ordinary beauty, a world far from the glare of Hollywood. With her, Ellen found a brief calm after the storm, a home filled not with headlines but with long conversations, creative projects, and slow mornings that felt almost normal. For a woman who had lived through so much public fire, ordinary was a miracle. Their relationship lasted 3 years, years marked by tenderness and the quiet rebuilding of trust. Together, they tried to craft a sanctuary away from cameras and curiosity. But beneath the serenity, small cracks began to appear. Ellen was still mending, still haunted by the ghosts of Anne and the uncertainty of a career trying to recover. Alexandra, gentle as she was, loved a woman still divided between craving peace and chasing purpose.
So much so that her name could not be whispered. The original canceled, and I am going to be original uncanceled. I am uncanceled today. I am finished with that. This is what I say. Goodbye.
Ellen was restless, torn between gratitude for the stillness and a hunger for something greater, something that could heal and inspire. Their lives began to drift apart. Ellen drawn back into the spotlight, Alexandra toward the privacy of her art. By 2004, the relationship ended quietly. No scandal, no anger, just the ache of two people who loved each other, but couldn't bridge the distance between who they were and who they were becoming. Looking back, Alexandra represented transition, the bridge between heartbreak and healing. If Anne had been the fire that tested Ellen's courage, Alexandra was the stillness that allowed her to breathe again. She reminded Ellen that love didn't always have to hurt, that it could be gentle, grounding, and real, even if it wasn't forever. And when that chapter closed, Ellen emerged ready to recognize and receive the love that would define her next era. The love that would not just comfort her, but anchor her through the greatest storms yet to come. Portia de Rossi.
I'm Portia. This is my wife, Ellen.
Hi.
And
we've been together for 16 years.
By 2004, Ellen DeGeneres, then 46 years old, was a woman carved by storms that would have broken many. She had lost a love that burned too brightly in Anne Hetch, drifted through the fragile calm of Alexandra Hedison, and carried wounds that fame could never fully hide. Bruised, weary, and almost convinced that permanence was not meant for her, Ellen was a survivor still searching for peace. And then, in the quiet of that exhaustion, she met Portia de Rossi, a 31-year-old Australian actress whose beauty masked her own silent battles. Portia, known for Ally McBeal and Arrested Development, had spent years performing the same exhausting act Ellen once knew too well, smiling for cameras while crumbling inside. Beneath the poise and elegance lay a woman fighting eating disorders, depression, and the suffocating fear of being seen for who she truly was. When their paths crossed, it wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. Two women, both battered by expectation and secrecy, looked at each other and finally saw something they hadn't seen in years: understanding.
That I get to share my life with her.
From that first spark, something extraordinary took root. For the first time in years, Ellen's laughter came from joy, not defense. And for Portia, love finally felt like safety, not survival. Their relationship blossomed in simplicity: quiet breakfasts in sunlit kitchens, long walks where silence spoke louder than words, evenings spent not performing but existing. The miracle wasn't in grand gestures, it was in the peace they found just by being near each other. Ellen once said, "Portia made me feel more love than I ever imagined possible." Portia, in turn, called Ellen her soulmate, her anchor, the person who steadied her storms. Their bond was immediate but intentional, built not on impulse but on a shared hunger for truth. And in 2005, they chose to stop hiding. They walked into the light, hand in hand, unafraid. In a Hollywood still ruled by whispers, their love was a rebellion, a declaration that authenticity mattered more than approval. Slowly, the world began to change around them. In 2008, when California briefly legalized same-sex marriage, Ellen and Portia seized the moment. In an intimate ceremony at their Beverly Hills home, they exchanged vows, surrounded by close friends and family. There was no spectacle, no Hollywood gloss, just tears, laughter, and two voices trembling as they promised forever.
Let's get married.
Here.
So that was that.
Ellen, 50, stood radiant, almost disbelieving that a dream she once thought impossible was now her reality. Portia, 35, glowed with quiet serenity, a woman who had finally found home after years of exile from herself. For Ellen DeGeneres, England is not an escape, it's a reckoning, a place where she can finally slow down, breathe, and accept that legacy isn't built on fortune or fame, but on the courage to keep living honestly, even after the spotlight fades. The contrast could not be sharper. This is the same woman who once stood at the beating heart of American pop culture, whose quick wit, impeccable timing, and fearless originality transformed comedy from smoky club stages into the comfort of living rooms across the nation. And when she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016, it wasn't just for her humor. It was for her cultural impact, for shifting hearts, opening minds, and redefining what was possible for someone brave enough to live as herself. But this was also the woman who endured devastating backlash. The collapse of her sitcom after she came out in 1997, and the storm of 2020 that questioned the very kindness on which she built her empire. Ellen DeGeneres' legacy is not pristine, not unbroken, but perhaps that imperfection is what makes her triumph so profound. Her brilliance shone not because life was easy, but because she refused to let its shadows extinguish her light. To measure her life by perfection is to miss the truth of her story. Her greatness was never in being flawless, but in daring, again and again, to live in the open, even when the cost was staggering. So whether you admired her or doubted her if her voice ever filled the silence of a lonely afternoon, leave a line of thanks below and share what part of her journey stays with you most. The laughter, the resilience, the storms, or the way she kept finding her way back to the stage. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.